This episode of New Politics was released on the 17th of July, 2026, and produced on the lands of the Wangal and Gadigal people.
Is the Royal Commission really investigating anti-Semitism or just policing criticism of Israel? And can social cohesion survive when some voices are listened to while other voices are ignored? A Royal Commission that applies double standards won't create cohesion. All it's going to do is deepen the division. I'm Eddie Djokovic.
I'm David Lewis. All of this is coming up in this big episode of New Politics.
And we've got an announcement about a new publication that we've just launched, and it's called the New Politics Quarterly. It's an analysis of the state of Australian politics at the moment and a review of the past 3 months. Now, it's available as an ebook and a PDF download. We'll be looking at providing it as an audio book as well. You do get it as a subscriber, so subscribe now. It's just $5 per month, either through Patreon or Substack. And of course, this is another good way to support independent journalism.
Anger in Sydney CBD as protesters demanded the inquiry hear from anti-Zionist Jews. Inside, the country's public broadcasters took the hot seat, defending coverage of the Israel-Gaza war. Australia's special envoy to combat anti-Semitism was scathing of the ABC. She called for an external complaints body separate from the broadcaster's ombudsman.
They can mark their own homework. I mean, they are judge, counsel and jury.
Commissioner Virginia Bell and counsel assisting Richard Lancaster questioned whether an external complaints committee with representatives chosen for their viewpoints may compromise the ABC's editorial independence. Jillian Segal conceded that may be the case.
The Royal Commission into Anti-Semitism and Social Cohesion has continued this week, and it was supposed to investigate anti-Semitism and strengthen social cohesion. And that's one of the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's favourite terms. But it seems to be something that's working in the opposite direction. And a lot of the public evidence that is being presented seems to be anecdotal and unverified. And that's not to say that all of it is. There actually have been some clear examples of anti-Semitism which have been clearly documented, but what we're hearing is tending to elevate the political perspectives of some. So there's people like Special Envoy Jillian Segal, who wants to totally shut down debate about anything at all to do with the state of Israel. And most of this material is being unquestioned. But when we hear from the more progressive voices from the Jewish community, such as Sarah Schwartz from the Progressive Jewish Council of Australia, or Yasmin Johnson, who's the co-convener for Students for Palestine, they've been relentlessly questioned and interrogated by counsel assisting at the Royal Commission, primarily because they're providing the perspectives that we never hear about from the Jewish community, and it's also a narrative that's quite different to what the Zionist groups in Australia want the rest of us to hear. Now, there's no question about this, David. Genuine anti-Semitism absolutely needs to be investigated. But a Royal Commission should be impartial when it comes to testing this material, not simply validating certain experiences while aggressively questioning others when it doesn't suit their purposes. And generally, if social cohesion is to have any meaning, it needs to have equal boundaries and fair treatment for everyone. Otherwise, it just doesn't mean anything at all.
Ideas, of course, can be debated. The idea of Zionism, the idea of the Israeli government, the idea of the Australian government. Policy, what shouldn't be brought in is, of course, things like anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, racism in its broader sense. Everyone should be able to live in Australia and all have the same rights and privileges and responsibilities that everyone else does, unless you break the law in a general way, and then your rights can be curtailed. But as long as that is applied consistently, then that's the sign, I think, of a good and healthy polity. I think the Royal Commission has to remember that Now, I have heard a theory, and I speak with absolutely no knowledge of this, that the Royal Commission is just letting the rat bag element talk without. So at the end, when they come out with a finding that may not be what the louder voices want, they can't be accused of not having had their say. So for people who are seen as more reasonable, they are grilling them, as a Royal Commission should. And for those whose opinions are a little bit less open to critical force, shall we say, the defence will be, you had your say. What more could we have done? Now, again, I have to stress, I don't know that's true, and we won't know, of course, till the Royal Commission releases its findings, whenever that'll be. Certainly, the anti-Semitism envoy is very interested in extending her brief as far as she possibly can, to the point where she wants to close down free speech in university. Now, again, a Jewish person should be able to walk onto campus feeling safe that they won't be attacked because of their background, as should a Middle Eastern person, as should an Asian, as should an English immigrant or foreign student, as should an English foreign student. But she wants more than that. She doesn't want people to say, oh, hold on, this policy of the Israeli government in which 70,000 people were killed probably isn't a good thing. She denied that was the figure, even though that figure was pretty much agreed to by Israel, which, given the state of the current Israeli government, means that it could be much higher. I've seen figures as high as 680,000. I don't have access to the data they're using. The point is, one is too many. So we're in figures here that are almost beyond human comprehension.
But also, it's not just universities that Jillian Segal is looking at. So the Australian public broadcasters are also in her sight as well. And they are facing this new threat from Jillian Segal. And one of the things that she wants to introduce is an independent body to scrutinise the coverage of Israel and Palestine by the ABC and by SBS. So you can imagine that it wouldn't be independent at all. And she's suggesting that they need to adopt the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which also includes criticism of Israel as well within there, and also suggested that the ABC and SBS need to report on more of the good things that Israel does. And I'm sure there might be some good news out there somewhere, but I don't know where they could find it. Now, Jillian Segal
picked up a puppy and patted it today. Meanwhile,
yeah, that's
in
right.
Gaza,
Yes, that's right. The other point is that Jillian Segal might not know this, but there is a word for this sort of independent body to oversee what a public broadcaster is doing, and it's known as propaganda, David. You could call it other things, agitprop, indoctrination, brainwashing, disinformation. I'm sure that there's a few other words in the thesaurus that we could dig out. But the whole idea of public broadcasting is to be independent of all these governments. Now, sure, it's run by government or it's funded by government, but it's meant to be independent of government. It's also meant to be independent of political appointments such as Jillian Segal and lobby groups. And the Zionist lobby already has a great deal of influence over the ABC and SBS, so this would entrench it even further. But these sort of ideas, they just need to be chucked out. They need to be thrown out as soon as possible. And the ABC and SBS have already rejected the use of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. Jillian Segal wants it to go in there. And she's got a full year of her 3-year term to go. And I'm just wondering how much damage she can actually do over the next year. All of these are ambit claims, but they just have to be fully rejected, because it's not just a threat to journalism and the work that we might be able to do, but it's a threat to free speech, and it affects everyone.
Yeah, again, it's not about targeting Jewish people. It's about targeting bad policy, and it's about questioning moral issues. Is it right for any country, including the United States, to take over another country? Is it right for a settler state? And these are very awkward questions for Australia. Is it right for a settler state to just appear in the middle of nowhere and take over? I'd note Anthony Albanese was asked the other day in jest about New Zealand and its place in the Australian Constitution. And in the end, of course, New Zealand decides not to be part of the Australian Federation and decides to be independent, which for much of its life was seen as a mistake.
It's still mentioned in the Constitution, though.
It's still in the Constitution. Yes, they are. Of course, when Scott Morrison took over and Jacinda Ardern was prime, we thought, hold on, they didn't make the mistake, we made the mistake. But technically, I think the Prime Minister was right when he said, and this is all in jest, that Australia could just take over New Zealand if we wanted. Now, it's not going to happen, and it would be wrong for it to happen. New Zealand is a valid, legitimate governance with a strong import-export trade portfolio and its own culture and beliefs and procedures. So if Australia did, you could bet we'd be pretty critical of it. On a different scale, Israel trying to push into Gaza is something that we should be critical of. And I'll be really fair here. If it turns out, oh no, they're doing it for good and valid reasons, I don't think they are, but let's just then we should be able to do that. It goes both ways. So yeah, good news stories from a country that in many people's eyes is committing a genocide. And again, I'm talking about a government here, not every single person in the country. And we shouldn't be stopped from criticising those things that need to be criticised. And that's government behaviour.
So a royal commission, well, it's supposed to test evidence and adjudicate on that evidence. It's not there just to simply collect stories and anecdotes. And even the Robodebt Royal Commission, which happened 3 years ago now, that was mainly based on testimonies from people who were affected by Robodebt. But even all of that material had to be tested and corroborated. So you didn't get people saying, oh, this happened to me, and then you find out that it didn't actually happen. All of this information has to be tested. And in this case, you're just getting a lot of people providing their stories without much verification. And Jillian Segal, the special envoy, she has outlined what the benchmark is and just seems to be very low.
Those criticisms, would you agree it's difficult to test propositions when they're expressed at that level of generality?
Well, exactly. But they are a perception, and a very strongly held perception from the Jewish community, that the way in which the Gaza conflict in particular and the activities that are going on in the Middle East are reported have created an impression of great negativity about Israel.
And the result of this sort of benchmark is that we're getting a lot of garbage presented at the Royal Commission. Not all of it, some of it is very good, but there's a lot of stuff which, in my opinion, is irrelevant, including the accusation that the use of the hyphen itself is anti-Semitic.
Anti-Zionism with a hyphen was a commonly used term.
I noticed you referred
before,
to that. How do you detect the presence or the absence of a hyphen in the spoken word?
What was that?
How do you detect the presence or absence of a hyphen in the spoken word? I noticed that you made that distinction. But
yeah, so these are complete different analytical ways of looking at something.
No, I'm asking you.
What was that?
You gave evidence that the presence or absence of a hyphen may change the meaning of the word anti-Zionist. And I just asked you, how do you detect the presence or absence of a hyphen in the spoken word?
Oh, because I define anti-Zionism as anti-Zionism was defined when the question was about whether the state of Israel should be founded or not.
The question from Council Assisting, is that what you mean?
Was that?
Are you referring to the council?
No, I'm just referring to what was historically a debate around Zionism among the Jewish people.
Can we agree on this then? The meaning of the term has changed over time?
I would say is that people have used the term anti-Zionism with a hyphen to mean something that is different, yes.
And that was Professor Josh Keller, representing the Australian Academic Alliance Against Anti-Semitism, also known as the 5A. There he is accusing the hyphen of anti-Semitism. I'm not sure if what I just said is with a hyphen or without, but it's almost reached a point where you don't even have to comment on this stuff, David. These Zionists are just making themselves look so ridiculous and so foolish.
This goes back to my friend's theory, that let them talk.
Yeah, maybe that's the case. So at least on that occasion, he was interrogated just a little bit, but other perspectives are getting a lot more cross-examination. Here's the co-convener of Students for Palestine, Yasmin Johnson.
To start with, the idea that a call for freedom is actually a racist call for genocide is a smear on the Palestine movement, which is opposing the systematic denial of rights to Palestinians. I mean, this is a call for freedom from oppression that has been going on for decades. I find it offensive when there is actually a genocide going on and it is being carried out by the Israeli state against Palestinians, something which is regularly forgotten, that our side are the ones calling for a genocide. We are calling for the ability of all peoples to live free from discrimination, regardless of their race or religion, in this land. That's our call, and that's a call against genocide, against apartheid, against racism. That some people might be willing to misinterpret this, I think, is an attempt to slander the Palestine movement. On the other hand, I don't think the legitimacy of social justice movements rests on them never offending anyone. I mean, to take the civil rights movement, for example, I'm sure there were any number of racist white people who claimed that it was threatening to them to have black people in their communities when busing was going on, or who claimed that they were afraid for their children's safety when they were being bused. These examples demonstrate, I think, that the primary concern in a democracy when we're talking about free speech cannot be simply whether somebody's feelings will be hurt by something or not.
So she was seriously cross-examined, like, as you mentioned before, David, as all material should be at a Royal Commission. But on this occasion, it just seems to be quite selective. Yasmin Johnson was then attacked by the Zionist groups and the right-wing media, as was Sarah Schwartz, who provided her evidence last week, and both have been labelled as traitors and capos and self-loathing Jews. And they're the same sort of words that are used against Anthony Lowenstein as well. And if anyone else behaved like this, David, they'd be accused of anti-Semitism, with or without hyphen, both probably. But we've always pushed that idea on New Politics that there are many, many perspectives within the Jewish community about Israel and Palestine. And clearly not everyone within the community supports the actions of Israel. But the main voices that we hear, or mainly hear, are from the extremist and highly conservative Zionists. And I think that in itself is a real problem.
Yeah, and that is the problem. There are, of course, organised protests in Israel every day by people of Jewish background protesting the genocide, protesting the Likud party, protesting. There are people who are, of course, in favour of the idea of Israel, who are against the current policies. There are Jewish people who don't think Israel should be a thing. And again, this is not to say that one branch of, or one person who agrees with us is a good Jew, and someone who disagrees with us is a bad Jew. That's not at all. And I can see where some people might get a bit, you can't like the ones that agree with you. It's got to be across the board that everybody gets accepted. And that's absolutely true. But we've got to grow up and learn that disagreement and moral argument is not the same as racism and anti-Semitism and all the bad things. It gets frustrating to hear that they're trying to claim the hyphen in anti-Zionism is somehow I can't even conceive of the argument as to how you'd get that. Next thing is the letter Z going to be anti-Semitic because some people refer to Zionists as Zs because they don't want to say the word.
Excuse the pun, David, but I think we need to put a full stop to all of this malarkey, and that's what it is. That's ridiculous. Yeah. Is the exclamation mark used after Israel, is that going to be considered to be anti-Semitic, hyphen or unhyphen? It's just a confused world that we're being presented with within this Royal Commission.
I remember the famous graffiti back, I think it was in the early 1980s, and it was Stop Begin, referring to Menachem Begin, the Israeli Prime Minister at the time. And of course it looked very funny because of the way Begin is spelled. Now, is that anti-Semitic? No. It turns into a pun in English.
Well, it's very well hidden. Stop, begin.
Yeah. And it's a valid political point. Here is a political figure whose policies I don't like. We need to stop him. Okay. Again, and I do understand too that some of this stuff can slip into the I'm just joking when you tell a slightly racist joke. Oh, it's just a joke. I didn't mean to hurt anybody's feeling. That may be true. But if you're not the butt of the joke and you're not speaking from within the culture, it can be quite hurtful and exclusionary. Sure, I get all that. But some things need to be criticised. And genocide and displacement needs to be criticised. Not because the people doing it are Jewish, but because they are of a particular political alignment that we happen to not agree with. If you can't laugh at racists, who can you laugh at?
This is New Politics, independent analysis of Australian and international politics. For more free articles and analysis, join us at newpolitics.com.au.
But I think this is also probably missing the bigger picture, because the Royal Commission has spent a lot of time examining these incidents of anti-Semitism, hyphenated or not, or alleged incidents of anti-Semitism, and, well, on Australian campuses. That's what it's been pretty much over the past week or two. But very little attention has been paid to what has happened in Gaza and what is happening today. And there is this new term known as scholasticide, where a state targets educational and cultural institutions of a particular group of people. Now, the practice itself is not new. That's been around for a long time. But this term, scholasticide, so that's relatively new. And the State of Israel has killed 18,000 students over the past 3 years, around 800 teachers, and at least 120 university professors. It's also destroyed 97% of schools and universities in Gaza. And these factors and issues haven't been talked about at all at this Royal Commission. But we heard from one student who announced to everyone on campus, to everyone that she knows, that she's a proud Zionist and a big supporter of Israel. And she spent quite a bit of time saying that she was upset that no one wanted to be her friend anymore. But I've got the feeling, David, that maybe being supportive of a regime that kills so many students, so many professors and academics, and blows up 97% of schools and universities in Gaza is probably not the best way to win friends. And I'd like to think of myself as a pretty tolerant person, but I would not like to be a friend to someone who supports that agenda. And I know we talked before about we've got to distinguish between the bad people and the good people, or whatever it is, but sometimes that's a little bit more difficult based on what someone's belief systems are. But this is what is going on in Gaza. It's genocide, ecocide, scholasticide, whatever you want to call it. And even though we might be halfway around the world from Gaza and Palestine and Israel, this helps to explain why people, whether it's on campus or in the rest of society, it helps to explain why people feel the need that they have to protest against this. Then you're not going to get that social cohesion that Anthony Albanese keeps going on about unless you start looking at all the underlying issues. And so far, this Royal Commission has been ignoring these underlying issues.
It has. And Hitler was a vegetarian and loved dogs. So that makes everything else all right. And sure, it must be not easy for the student who doesn't have any friends and whose friends seem to have left her. But that's part of the cut and thrust of ideas. You lose friends. You either think that your opinions are strong enough and right enough that you defend them and people get offended and cut contact, or you think maybe these are wrong. There's this sort of expectation that you should be able to hold whatever abhorrent opinion you like without consequence. And we can go the other way. Environmental people have lost friends because they've disagreed with something that has affected somebody else in a positive way, but it's bad for the environment. And that's the case. Free speech isn't free. It comes with responsibility. You have to be careful not to overstate your argument. You have to be careful that what you say doesn't harm people inadvertently. You have to be careful that what you say is defensible. Just because you can say it doesn't mean you should. And yeah, the whole free speech, and the free speech warriors are great. I have the right to George Brandis, you've got the right to be a bigot. You do, but there is a consequence and a responsibility for that. And an Attorney General should have said, and you can be a bigot, but it's going to cost you. And it's the same with this woman. Okay, great. Stand up for your principles. Stand up for your beliefs. Doing that comes with a cost. And if you're not prepared to wear the cost, then perhaps they're not really your beliefs.
And I guess it also gets back to what does this whole idea of social cohesion actually mean? And what is this Royal Commission actually trying to achieve as well? Jillian Segal's position, the special envoy to combat anti-Semitism, well, that position itself, that was forced upon the Australian government after intense pressure from the United States, which also means intense pressure from the APAC funders and Zionist groups in the United States. And the way that I see all of this, David, is that we're heading down this the American path where anything at all that is deemed to be anti-Semitic, even when it's not anti-Semitic, or if it's got a hyphen or not a hyphen or full stop or exclamation mark or whatever, it's a little bit like Alice in Wonderland, where it's true if you really imagine it, or if it's true just because someone says that it's true. And even a hyphen can be anti-Semitic in this brave new world. And
the ampersand is next.
Yeah, that's right, the ampersand. So the trusty old ampersand, anti-Semitic, who would have thought it? But the point is that we've had a good joke about this and had a good laugh about it, and we can always suggest, oh no, how can anything like that be deemed to be anti-Semitic? But when you've got the laws to back all of this rubbish up, then anything at all is possible. And this all ends up being the opposite of social cohesion. It's going down the path of creating legislation that suffocates people and hunts people down and then criminalises people, just like all of those pensioners and people in wheelchairs arrested for holding up a Palestine action sign in the UK or in the US, where people are removed from their positions for having a single negative thought about the state of Israel. And this whole agenda, I know that it's an ambit claim, but sometimes in these sort of situations, the ambit claim becomes a reality. And I just think that it has to be resisted at every opportunity. And this is at a time when, instead of having this irrelevant Royal Commission, and might be a bit unfair here, but listening to these spoiled, privileged brats go on about their hurt feelings or about some professor claiming that the hyphen is anti-Semitic, well, we should be holding a Royal Commission into domestic violence and the effects on women. And just this week we had 2 women murdered by violent men, and that's 37 so far this year. My point is that there are just so many more important issues that we should be holding Royal Commissions on. Now, looking at anti-Semitism, that's an important issue, but this is not the Royal Commission that we should have had on anti-Semitism. This one's a bit of a joke as far as I'm concerned.
Again, till we know what the findings are, we can't really speculate. But if it was to promote social cohesion, it hasn't done that good a job. It seems, I've seen a few people say that the only acceptable racism is Islamophobia. Now, that's not my view. That's not my view. I live from my bedroom window, you can see the biggest mosque in Sydney. I believe it to be. So I am very, don't know if I'd say it, pro-Islamic. I accept everyone. I think that's a better way of putting it. But certainly Pauline Hanson can say things about people from the Middle East and Muslims in particular and not be pulled up for it in the mainstream press. Yet I didn't read the article because I don't buy it. I think it was the Sunday Telegraph had a headline on the front page, just as a read on page 23 type thing, Antisemitism in our schools. I'm thinking, I don't know that this is a terribly credible article. Again, not to say that I think there should be anti-Semitism in the schools. There absolutely should not be.
That's it for this episode of New Politics. Thanks for listening in. And if you value independent journalism without the influence of corporate backing, join New Politics at newpolitics.com.au and support us directly. It's just $5 per month, and we always try to keep it very simple. If you like what we do, please send some support our way. It keeps our commitment to independent journalism ticking along. I'm Eddie Djokovic. Thanks for listening in, and it's goodbye to our listeners.
I'm David Lewis. We'll see you next time.